Hello. So we continue the discussion on the money supply and monetary policy. And now we are going to talk about the effects on the economy under different monetary policies. First of all, I want to remind you that there are two main targets of the central bank: inflation rate or price level, and output or employment. So whether it's GDP or whether it's employment level that the central bank aims to achieve. Uh, there are two operating targets: money aggregates and interest rate, what the central bank may orientate to. And normally the central bank is concentrated on one out of two operating targets, whether it is trying to keep the money aggregate stable or the interest rate stable. And now I want to present to you the different effects on the economy of the same happenings depending on what operating target the central bank choose. So first of all, let's talk about shock in the commodity market. In general, shock is the situation when something changes suddenly, which we did not estimate it before, and we didn't know that. So that's why it's shock. Because if we knew that coming, so the central bank would have adjusted earlier, and there would be no surprises. So let's assume that we have a shock in the commodity market. So we have a shock in the production sector. It might be the huge increase in consumption, for example, or it might be uh, big changes of government expenditure. And so the shock might be positive or negative. When the positive, which means that the demand in the economy increases and which makes GDP to grow up, or negative would mean that the demand in the economy decreases and that makes the economy to go down. So those two different graphs represent different outcomes depending on the operational target that is chosen by the central bank of a country. So in picture A, you see two possible commodity shocks indicated. So they could be illustrated as a shift of IS curve. In the case of a positive curve, the IS shifts to the right, and in the case of a negative shock, IS curve shifts to the left. And so let's assume we have this negative shock. What we have now in most of the economies in the world. So what if we have this big decreasement in consumption and the IS curve shifts to the left? If the central bank is sticked to keep some certain amount of money in the economy, so it was concentrated on the money aggregates, um, they would have no response. They shouldn't have any response or any changes in monetary policy. In this case, the IS curve just simply shifts to the left, and we have a new equilibrium in the economy with the R2 and Y2, where the interest rates are lower than it used to be before, and GDP is lower than it used to be before. So we have this uh, slowdown in the economy with a decreasement in interest rates as well. In a B case, in a B picture, we have the same uh, demand shock represented. So assuming that, let's say, consumption decreases dramatically, so we have a leftward shift of IS, but which should make the interest rates lower. But in this case, we assume that central bank is concentrated on a particular interest rate, so we set the interest rate and we aim to keep it there. In this case, it means that as demand decreases and consumption decreases, um, the demand for money decreases as well. And so lower demand for money lowers the interest rates. In order to keep the interest rates at the same level, central bank should lower the money supply or should decrease the money supply, which would be as a leftward shift of LM curve as well. So LM curve should shift to the left as well, saying that the new equilibrium would be established here at the same interest rate as it was before, R0, but with way lower GDP compared with the A case. GDP decreases even more with the intervention of the central bank, because keeping the interest rates at the same level lowers the, or doesn't support the investment as it is in A case. The second situation is when we have stock in the money market. Let's assume it's growth of prices. Now suddenly the price level in the economy increases. That's what, as the price level increases, the demand for money grows up as well, as people need more cash now in order to pay for everything they want to buy. And so as the demand for money increases, the interest rates in the economy should go up, as it is indicated by leftward shift of LM curve. And we would have a situation with a higher output, with a lower output and higher interest rate. Have a shock in the money market could be negative as well, so when we would have an opposing situation. Comparingly with these two possible policies, on the right side graph, you see the same situation that I've just said before, that in case if central bank is orientated towards money aggregates, it would allow interest rates to go up, and so we have a recession economy, which end up with the higher interest rates. In case we have a central bank orientated towards keeping the interest rate stable, in this ISLM graph, we would see no movements because all the changes would happen just simply in the money market, or with the money market equilibrium. And that's what the graph on the left side illustrates. We had a previous equilibrium here with MS0 and MD, with some certain quantity of money in the economy M0 and interest rates R0. If the price level in the economy increases, the demand for money shifts up, as people would need more cash in order to pay for all their purchases. And this leftward shift would simply increase the interest rates. If the central bank is oriented towards keeping the interest rate stable, its response should be increasement of the money supply as well, so that at the end the interest rates would remain the same. So we would see the money supply growing, though interest rates remaining stable, and that's why there would be no shift in LM curve or no shift in equilibrium. So in this case, when we have a shock in the money market, orientation towards interest rates gives us more stability in the economy. The third case is about supply shocks. And we already said what happens if we have a demand side shock, what happens if we have a shock in the money market, and now about supply side. Supply side shocks are already a bit longer run in the economy, as all the adjustments in supply happens not that quickly and takes longer time. So that's why you see now not ISLM, but aggregate supply and aggregate demand model for illustration. So let's say we used to have equilibrium here with a long run aggregate supply curve and short run aggregate supply curve, as well as aggregate demand curve intersects. And let's assume that we have a supply shock, a negative supply shock, which means that supply decreases or the prices in the economy goes up. You can simply recall the situation which was in most countries of the world in the beginning of 2020, when China shut down because of the COVID-19, and on one hand, for the rest of the world, there was like nothing happening. I mean, we were free to go and free to do whatever we want. But as China is the major producer, its quarantine or its lockdown caused whether the shortages of supply or some also logistics issues, which lead to the shortage of some goods and some, especially intermediate goods, or those companies who tried to find out to find other suppliers usually found out that other suppliers are offering higher prices, so which means higher cost for those companies, which at the end would mean um, more costly production and probably higher prices. This didn't last so long that we would see the entire effect, as then the rest of the world went into lockdown and then the situation was changed. But taking this example, what happens? This is an example of a supply shock when suddenly we have a problem in supply, or we have a problem with getting intermediate goods. We have a problem in the cost of intermediate goods, and so that's why the aggregate supply long run curve as well as short run curve would shift to the right, meaning to the left, meaning that we have an increasement of prices. So the equilibrium moves to dot with P1, and so we have an increasement in prices. Now let's think what happens next. If the increasement of prices, remember what we just said, the increasement of prices leads to the increasement of the demand for money, as people would be willing to have more cash. And so the increasement of demand for money increases the interest rates. If the central bank is orientated towards keeping the money aggregates the same, so keeping the quantity of money the same, they would do nothing. And so the economy would simply stay in this equilibrium with higher prices, lower GDP, and a bit lower interest rates than previously. Now, if the central bank has its intermediate target as interest rate, and it aims to keep interest rates stable. When the price level increases and the demand for money increases, and interest rates went up, central bank should increase the money supply so that to lower the interest rate to the previous level. As the central bank increases money supply, the aggregate demand curve would shift to the right, and so we would see the economy moving towards higher GDP. So we would have, let's say, growth maybe, but with even higher price level. So we would have, let's say, equilibrium somewhere here with even higher price level because of this expansionary monetary policy that central bank is doing. There is no good answer about what central bank should take as its primary intermediate target. Though what we see from this comparison of different situations, we can find some positive and negative things of the orientation towards interest rates. I want to add here a bit saying that traditionally, even in the majority of the textbooks in macroeconomics, we assume central bank or keeping the money aggregate stable, so observing the money supply, the quantity of money in the economy, and not paying so much attention towards interest rates. But now what we see in real life is that central banks are orientated towards interest rate policy way more, and so we have this shift a bit towards keeping the interest rate stable rather than the money aggregates. So what happens, or why they do this? So the positive thing on keeping the interest rate stable or orientated towards the control of the interest rate is that the impact path is shorter compared with the changes of money aggregate. But we see even more that central banks, they change the interest rate, or the discount rate, and they announced it. So giving already the message to all the players in the economy, what is the discount rate now, how did they change it, so what changes in the economy could expect. Sometimes even more, when making a decision on the discount rate today, they say that next time, and normally they meet regularly, so their meeting schedule is known in advance. So we say next time, for example, we're going to increase the interest rate. So we already say about what we are planning to do and what we are going to do next time. Why it's good? Because when people know what's going to happen next, for sure, already we have some sort of the adequate expectations, and we change their behavior already today. And so that leads to more quick effect in the economy of a monetary policy. And that's why it is considered to be the positive effect of the interest rate orientation. But there, of course, there are some problems. First of all, the central bank cannot control all the differentials of the interest rates. Central bank sets only the discount rate, so the interest rate for the commercial banks, but all the other interest rates are set freely in money market, and the central bank doesn't have any effect on them, any direct effect on them, and the commercial banks can set all the other interest rates freely, and there's always some probably small risk that commercial banks wouldn't do what the central bank wants them to do. Anyway, even the interest rate has a short-term impact on the economy. The changes of interest rates has the effect on the aggregate demand with a lag of about 6 to 8 quarters, which means if the central bank changes the discount rate today and the interest rates in the economy changes, the shifts of the aggregate demand would happen in 1.5 or 2 years, which is still very long, and sometimes the situation in the economy might be very different. Effect is low in the short run, but so what happens today doesn't change the economy so much, but the effect is very significant in the long run. We saw those big deviations of the GDP, and that's why central banks should be more careful about making their policies. The last thing to discuss in this video is about taking price level as their main goal or as their main target. Why do central banks choose inflation or price level as their primary goal? Why do they aim to maintain price stability? One of the reasoning is that prices doesn't change that quickly, and the effects of monetary policy on the economy is also with a quite big lag. So this is the indicator which you can inflation rate is the indicator which you can affect when you are prepared and when you do something in very advance. On the other hand, changes of price level affects the nominal interest rates a lot, and as the central bank is responsible for the stability of the financial sector, of the stability on the financial markets, it is important for them to control the inflation rate so that to keep financial markets stable or as stable as it could be. Now, what is the effect of monetary policy on the price level? So we discussed already a bit, saying that when the central bank increases the money supply, it causes a shifts in aggregate demand, and we could see price levels growing. So that's why all the shifts in aggregate demand should correspond with shifts in the aggregate supply, so that at the end, the price levels would remain as stable as they